Tonight, I have the express privilege of introducing Lonnie Graham, a compelling and insightful individual with an artistic practice that spans elements that are at once keenly individualistic and reflective, culturally activated, and at times aggressively questioning. Lonnie comes to us from Philadelphia. It's a long journey indeed, and I hope all of you have had a chance to walk through his exhibition in the adjacent gallery, A Conversation with the World. It came to us through a great generosity. Each of the 17 prints in the show were gifted to the people of Oregon via his donation to the museum, which says a lot about him as a person. In return, let me share a few items about Lonnie. He is a Pew Fellow and Distinguished Professor of Visual Art at Penn State University. He was formerly a Director of Photography at the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, an urban arts organization dedicated to arts and education for at-risk youth in Pittsburgh, where innovative projects he developed there were ultimately recognized by the White House as a national model for arts education. Professor Graham has also been presented the Governor's Award and cited as Artist of the Year in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He has served as a panel member for the National Endowment for the Arts, and in himself is a recipient of a NEA Pew Charitable Trust travel grant, and is a 4-time Pennsylvania Council for the Arts recipient. He is exhibited widely from Accra, Ghana, Christchurch, New Zealand, the U.S. Foundation in Paris, France, the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, and even along kiosks and streets of San Francisco and the rotunda of San Francisco City Hall, and of course here in Eugene. His work has been published and shared extensively, from light work in Syracuse, New York, to a beautifully crafted version of A Conversation with the World. It was published just last year by Dots Press in Seoul, Korea. I'd like to personally thank Sang-Yeon Ju, the director of the press and the founder of the Dots Museum, for her sharing the visual and printed materials that were also used in the exhibition here at the JSMA. Graham's practice has been called multidimensional. He uses photography and words to explore topics of humanity, community, and ancestry. And he also creates installations as a means of cultural activism. Basically, he's interested in understanding better the undifferentiated whole of humanness by investigating methods in which the arts may be used to achieve tangible meaning in people's lives. I've spent many hours studying Lonnie's approach as a curator and as an academic, but most satisfying is when I wear no hat at all, but simply respond. Actually, most everything we learn comes from others. Recently, when I was reading up on the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild and helped to lead, I stumbled upon the organization's Youth Honor Code. Each of the 5 tenets are worth considering. I will respect resources and individuals with which I work. I will listen with the intent to understand. I will embrace learning opportunities. I will shape solutions to problems. I will influence those around me to positive effect and be aware of how my conduct affects others. Lonnie's practice has been a long-haul process built upon the strength of engaging each moment, each person, each idea as fully and knowingly as possible. My grandmother said it in different words. One day at a time, one step at a time. Please do welcome Lonnie.
My gosh, what is it, Wednesday? Is this Wednesday?
Yes.
What the heck? You guys could be watching like, Netflix or something. And you come over here to thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thanks for having me, and thanks for, coming from, the distances that you do, whether it's across the parking lot or, across states, across state lines when it's legal. Thank you so much for attending. And if you haven't managed to see the really, really thoughtful and considerate presentation they put together over in the gallery, you should. I know all of the preparators did a wonderful job, and thank you, Will, in the back, for recording this thing. So, yeah, here, let me show you this. There's stuff, hold on. Is this gonna work? so there's stuff that I can't, there's stuff that I can say out loud, and then there's, like, I signed NDAs, national, whatever, not national defense, what is it, non-disclosure agreements, yeah. So I said, so there's some things that, like, there's some places that I can't talk about, and there's some things that I can say, and there's some things that I can't say. There's some parts of my life that were completely consumed. This was my COVID project. There's parts of my life that got just eaten alive by the press and by the community and everything else, but I can't talk about those things because I'm here to talk about art. I'm going to talk about artwork. But I can say that, yeah, that I'm the chair of the board for the San Francisco Art Institute. And I'm just trying to resuscitate this thing. And I cared so much about it because, Tom and I went there back in the 70s. I think we both started around 70 something. And, we both went up the hill through those great big red doors and fell in love. Seduced by little black and white pictures of interesting people that had anything to do with that organization. And I was starting to sound like a commercial, like, please save my school. But it's, if you missed the Saturday Night Live, Guido Sarducci came on and told people how to be artists, but that was a whole other thing. But, if it hadn't, I'll contextualize, if really seriously, if it hadn't been for that thing, if it hadn't been for that place, if it hadn't been for those certain individuals that I had, read about that was essentially legendary. It had the first photography department, in the United States, founded by, some venerable old guy who used to run around out in the park taking pictures of rocks. I mean, he sat next to me at my graduation. He was like, did you have a good time? So it was amazing. The place was just, I wouldn't be here. There are a couple of things and one of the reasons that I'm here now, is because of that fraternity. And it was because of that association with that place. So, and I had the first motion picture, so now I'm a commercial. The first motion picture was shown. The first movie, so you'd think you're missing Netflix, was shown at the San Francisco Art Institute back in the 1800s. After Edward Muybridge, like Stanford commissioned Muybridge to make that, thing with the horse, he showed that at the Art Institute. Anyway, so that was one influence, right? But then, so now influences, right? Because they always want to know your influences. They always want to say, well, what are your influences? Or how did you make those decisions that you made? Well, Grandma, Mary Graham, was born in 1860. She later met my grandfather, and they got married, 20 or so years later. And she continued to have children, so that my father was born, he was the baby. He was the last child that was born, like in the early 1900s. So my dad was, and my father didn't meet, Dad's daddy. So Dad didn't meet my mother until the 50s, right? So that's how we got to, and my mother was very, very young and very beautiful. And they, right? So this is the guy that trusted me with his future, right? So he made the decision that got me here before you tonight. Thank you, Lonnie.
You were adorable.
Thank you. But that was a long time ago. Okay, and my Aunt Dora. This, you'll see, she's instrumental later. Aunt Dora happens a little bit later. I'm gonna come over here and sneak a peek, see what happens next. Oh, geez, okay, wait a minute. So, I gotta do this. This is, I should probably read this thing. I'm gonna read this thing. Because you spoke about the governor's award. So I got the governor's award. Who knew? Like, one day they called me up and they say, okay, the governor wants to give you something. And I'm going, okay. So I go over there and I'm all nervous because I figured I had to say something because it was, somebody's going to write it down. So I wrote down this statement. I don't want to be breathing all into the thing, but at that time, and at this time too, later on I would write something else about art. Because at that time I believe, can you see it? Yeah. That art's the visual communication of a particular human experience. So like I'm a teenager, and I figured that somehow I would want visually to help people understand what I was, because I was talking about myself, what I was going through, and the best way that I could do that was with a picture. But later, my ideas would change. Things would happen. Like I'd get that award, and I figured I'd have to say something. And what I said, what I wrote, and I usually don't read from prepared notes, so forgive me. But I wrote that the definition of art and culture remain elusive. We feel compelled to manufacture meaning and weight for the esoteric efforts of the lone practitioner. The distance between art and society has grown so great that art makers have become agents for an exclusive, self-defined reality. The burden of that distance has proven so disorienting that we accept the craftsman's practice as a representative portrait of our collective selves. But a truer description of ourselves and our culture lies in the way in which we address our intrinsic needs: food, shelter, clothing, and with the respect that we render our minds and our bodies and our spirits. This is evident in original cultures, and even in our own pre-technological society. As artists, it is our duty to embrace the culture and honor ourselves and our ancestors. We cannot speak wisely of what we do not know. As a society, we must embrace the dreamers and the visionaries as we collaborate our future. When artists begin to address our essential needs, we open a dialogue with our fellow human beings. Our role as the distant prophet or the lone maverick or the clairvoyant shaman dissolves in the tangible context of real life. Ego is the most profound hallucinogen. As artists, we must not limit ourselves to the boundaries of our own imaginations. As our work centers on the needs of our community, it becomes validated by that community and ceases its singular exploration. It sparks a fire in 1,000 minds as we work shoulder to shoulder with our community. We fan the flames of enlightenment that burn away fear and prejudice and ignorance so that we all might stand together in the brilliant light of human understanding. You see, so that goes a little bit different to what this is, and I'll explain how that all happened right now. Just bear with me. Bear with me. Nobody ever gets it. Okay, fine. Go ahead. Okay. So just run through these. It's okay. These are just pictures. I'll go over here. That's Oregon. So's that. Oh, that's Japan. So I wasn't looking for a place. I was not necessarily identifying a place. I was looking for a common feeling. If there was something that was happening that I was trying to express, I would look for that and identify that in the landscape. Okay, and then I recognize the fact that this may have been a little, okay, it's me, I can talk about myself. I thought it was a little self-indulgent. So I stopped. And in fact, my people all those people that were right in the beginning, Grandma died in 1960. But Aunt Dora had become ill, Uncle Floyd, he wasn't doing very well. My father was aging. So I had to stop being in California, and I had to go back to Pennsylvania. Listen to the wording. I had to go back. I had to go back. So I went back to Pennsylvania so that I could figure out what to do. And when I got there, it was rather remarkable. I started to volunteer. I started to volunteer at this youth organization that Tom talked about a little bit earlier. And you can just go through these too. So, and I started to work with these young people. And because I was volunteering, I'd been given the use of a darkroom. I'd go into the darkroom, and every time I try to get in there to do some printing because they'd give me a show, all these people, these young people started to show up, and they wanted to know, like, hey, mister, what you doing? What is that? And I was like, well, I'm trying to explain the process. Never get any work done. I never got the show. These young people intervened. It became all about them and their experience, and they became the priority. And I recognized that somehow, and okay, go ahead. And then there was one fellow who just took the ugliest pictures. These things were awful. So, so I'd go out with them, because I had the big camera, right? I had the 4x5 and the Polaroid, and it was attractive to them to be able to get the picture instantaneously, and we'd go out and we'd set the thing up. And I don't know if have you seen the TED Talk? Good, I can tell you the story. Okay, so we're standing out there in the street, in this unfortunate area of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And, we're looking at these Polaroids and we're peeling them off, and we're just going to this really very challenging places in town, right? And we'd set everything up and he'd come back with these photographs, and I'm going, they're really bad. They were just bad. But, I'm trying to figure out, because he was a challenging student, I'll put it that way. So I was investing a lot of extra time to see if I could, sort of get over the hump and, break through. It wasn't working. And there we were, we were right there on the street in East Liberty. And he got the Polaroid, looked at it, and I said, Charles, man, how about, if we can improve the framing on this piece. If we just move the camera just a little bit and line up, the two sides, and, you got to watch the edges. And, just like a couple of really small adjustments are going to really improve the aesthetic quality of the what? The aesthetic, the balance, the composition, man, what you talking about? And I said, well, the artistic, he said, man, this ain't no art thing. And I'm going, oh, well, what is it? What? And he said, he explained to me that at that moment, that all of the photographs that we had been taken were somehow significant to the community. Nothing to do with anything that had to do with what I thought we were doing. Everything to do with what he understood about his experience within the context of the community. This is where Tashika got shot. This is where Darius got hit. This is where Marianne was killed. He was basically making a social diagram that everybody, he said, man, he said, when people from my neighborhood look at this work, he said, they all gonna know what it's about. Oh my gosh. So here I was, right? I've been traveling, you saw those pictures, been traveling all over the place. I've been photographing, this and that, and taking like all these photographs, traveling to, with Kenya and Mozambique and all over the place, looking for the artists, trying to figure out how to make art, looking for other artists. And the reason that I wasn't finding them in the way that I had wanted to is because I was looking for the wrong kind of work. There's that thing. Go ahead, just go on.
Next one.
Yeah, go ahead. You can look that up. We're not going to watch that. Go ahead. Yes. What a tradition. What an amazing tradition. And this man was living it. He was right there. He didn't know anything about this stuff. This suddenly made perfect sense, right? Here are artists working within and for their community, right? Here's a bunch of artists that are sitting around and they're thinking like, well, maybe we should get some of the guys together and go down and get some food. Maybe, bless you, maybe we should, go ahead. Yeah, so then, I'm down with Ndebele, right, down in South Africa. So, go ahead. So somebody had a baby, right? Go ahead. So then, somebody might have a wedding. So what they're doing is they're painting the houses, they're painting themselves. It's self-adornment. It's like, the community, the artists that are embedded in the community are working with the community, where they're working for the community. They're addressing needs like housing and like food and these vessels. They're making these items for self-adornment, right? These are all of the arts that are embedded deep within the community. There's no training, there's no art school, as much as we love it, This is just something that people do. This is just what we do. What's the next? Oh, yeah. So then I get invited to do, they want me to be an artist in residence. It's something called the Fabric Workshop, right? Like I know about fabric in Philadelphia. So I go to Philadelphia and I figured, okay, this is my chance. Now I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna be like, an artist like I wanna be, like Charles described, So go ahead. So then I said, I'm gonna do something for my folks. I'm gonna do something for my community. So I figured, okay, I'm gonna do something for Aunt Dora. So I did this thing, I called it Aunt Dora's Room. Go ahead. So, that picture, yeah, I took that picture. That little guy, you saw him. He took that picture. He took that picture and they put it in the Smithsonian Institution. That's in the Smithsonian. So, yeah, so I wanted to make something that everybody could relate to, right? I wanted to make something, because this is in the 90s. I wanted to make, there wasn't a whole lot of this that was happening at that time. So when people walked into the installation, I wanted them to be able to go in and sit down in the chair and smell Aunt Dora, because she wore cashmere bouquet. I wanted them to smell that perfume. And watch Louis Armstrong on the TV, I wanted people to be able to get up under there and maybe swat some flies or something, just like Aunt Dora. I wanted people to really, for the thing to assail every sense. If you didn't understand what it was, intellectually, if you couldn't feel, I don't have my little hickey, wait a minute. If you couldn't feel what happened when Aunt Dora's standing there in the doorway, right? Then if y'all could smell something, or maybe you could have another relative that related somehow to this thing, right? I wanted to activate all of the viewer's senses. That's what it was like. That was my house. And I knew I had something whenever I brought this thing home, because in the past, I'd bring my work home, those sticks, and I'd take those sticks and I'd show them to Uncle Floyd, and Uncle Floyd would look at them and he'd go, mm-hmm. Yeah, them is sticks. Yeah, that's a rock. But then, whenever I took that, I took a photograph of it, and I showed it to Uncle Floyd, and he looked at it. That's my house. And I said, yeah. He said, that's in the museum. I said, yeah. He said, how'd you do that? So now even Uncle Floyd is activated, right? Uncle Floyd is like, he's invested. I said, here we go. So what happens next? Everything is there. There's Kennedy, there's Martin Luther King. Daddy. So I had to do a piece about my dad. So I had Living in the Spirit house. So that's the Andora's room. But then, there's a paper thing, and, I wanted to do, so that was so I did this other thing for my dad. Daddy, whenever I travel, that's my daddy's house. When I would travel, I don't have my little pointer, but you can see on the left side is the map, and I'd call Daddy. In those days, you had to get on the matatu, you'd go downtown, you'd get into the telephone switching building, and they'd give you a little number, and you'd go to a booth, and they'd just, that one there, just go. So, they'd go and they'd plug your little earpiece in, and you'd sit there, and you're on the phone. Dad, son, is that you? Yeah, Dad. Well, where are you now, son? I'm in Nairobi. So, what? Okay, where's that? So I tell him, and Daddy would put a little red pin, like in the map. So when I came home, there'd be all these little red pins, like all over the place. So every place I went, he had, this is true, this is real, that was my dad's house. So but Daddy, his memory was failing. Daddy had Alzheimer's. So whenever they gave me the paper workshop, I wanted to take the lessons that he had taught me, like truth and humility and friendship, and I wanted to watermark them into the paper. And that's what you see back there. But I wanted the paper to be like a metaphor for my dad's memory. It was falling apart. So that's why it's all raggedy at the bottom. Because, the little paper fibers are kind of a metaphor. Oh, but I made a book. Go ahead. And I brought the book home. It's like a handmade book. Lothar Osterberg, he did the photogravure, and it's about friendship and humility and truth. And then we did this other, that's the one that I was telling you about. I don't know if you ever saw that one. But there's the bark cloth. Because the deal is people go to Africa and they make all these great books and they bring them back. The Africans, people, they don't see them. So I had it translated into Swahili and Kikuyu so people could read them. Go ahead, so that's that. Oh, here's some pictures from the book. Yeah, we were building a road in Muguga that went to Mombasa. Yeah, that guy was there. That's Uncle Floyd. So you see what's going on. We've got the spirit, that's Aunt Dora, because she had passed away. We've got the mind, that was Daddy. So I figured, okay, what's next? Well, we got to do. And we got the living room, and we got the dining room. Guess we better do the kitchen. So, so this is Uncle Floyd. He's in the garden. Oh, that's Mr. Karaoke. He's in the garden too. And it just drove me out of my mind because we were out there and I'm digging with Mr. Karaoke and we're out in the garden and we're just outside Nairobi someplace and I look at Mr. Karaoke and he's looking at me and then I remembered that other time that I was digging with Uncle Floyd on the other side of the world and here on the other side of the world. And here we were both engaged in this basic activity, this thing that everybody needs to do. Everybody needs to eat, right? And you can be anywhere in the world and people are probably engaged in doing much the same thing that me and Uncle Floyd were doing that day with that smoky thing, that we were out there in the garden messing around. Go ahead. And Mr. Karaoke was just an amazing individual. And I can't tell you that now because I'll probably talk too long and it'll take too much time to tell. But he had 9 kids. This was back in the 60s or something. He had 9 kids. He had dirt. He sent all of those kids to the United States. They all went to college. They all went back, and they all support the family. And I was telling Gray not so long ago that the one woman built the chips that are in your phone. The other one like works for Apple. These people were brilliant from dirt, right? I mean, they didn't have TV. So it's like, they got stuff done. Go ahead. Oh, so I started this thing called the African American Garden Project, like African and American Garden Project, right? Because it was like Americans and they were Africans. So I took some Africans, I took some Americans because they were complaining. Like I found them, they were like in Homewood in Pittsburgh someplace, and they had tablespoons. Somebody had decided that they had too much money, their welfare checks were too big. They were buying Cadillacs with all that welfare money. So they cut their welfare checks. So they didn't have a choice. And I'm walking down the street one day in the Homewood, and I said, what are you guys doing? And they said, well, we're gonna make a garden with this tablespoon because we don't have any more welfare money. So I said, right. So I went to Heinz, because they had food. It's Pittsburgh. They had food. You know, they got a lot of ketchup. So, and they had a lot of, ketchup is a food. So I got a bunch of money from these people, and oh, there's a garden in Kenya. So that's the garden. That's Mr. Karaoke's garden in Pittsburgh. So I took these women from Pittsburgh, and I took them to Kenya, and then I bought a bunch of gardeners from Kenya, and I took them to the United States so that they would have this like exchange project, right? I think that was still going. That was a long time ago. They call me up periodically, and they're like, Mr. Lonnie, you know who this is? I'm like, nobody calls me up and asks me that. You know, people say hello. So yeah, so they, anyway, that African American Garden Project, because it was the kitchen, and it was the mind and the body and the spirit, and it had everything to do with our basic human needs. It had everything to do with our homes. It had everything to do with where we live. It had everything to do with how we relate to each other. What's next? Oh, the home and the homeless. So yeah, go ahead. Show some more. Yeah, these guys, like I'm wandering around again, and somehow, I don't know what, but somebody says, hey, you want some money? And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? They said, you can do anything you want. And I said, it's like a grant, huh? And they said, yeah. And they said, do you want you want a billboard? And I was like, because one of my teachers used to do billboards. And I was going, yeah, maybe a billboard. They said, you can do stuff in the storefront. You can do the storefront, you can have stuff in the museum, and you can do a billboard. And I said, yeah, I could do magazines and newspapers and billboards. I'm an artist. I can do all that with a grant. And I'm walking down the street, and some guy's like sitting and he's going, you got it, you have $1. And I'm going, yeah, I got money, I'll give you $1. I gave him $1. I'm going and I'm looking at all the storefronts, and there's another guy. He's like, can you help a guy out? And I'm going, yeah, sure, here. And I'm fixing to throw away like tens of thousands of dollars away on a billboard. So there was a little restaurant on the corner. So I went to forget that. So I went to the restaurant, and I gave him a little bag of money. And I said, listen, here's some paper bags, and here's a bag of money. And I said, when somebody comes in with one of these bags, then you fill it up with food. And the guy's like, yeah, okay. So I gave him a bag of money. And then I went out and I met these fellas. And when they say, you want some, I say, yeah, you want some food? And they say, yeah. So I give them a bag and tell them to go over there and get some food. And it worked. So then I went back and I started buying clothes and junk. And I'd give them clothes and blankets. A home and the homeless. Then it got cold. And they didn't have any place to go. So when I photographed them, because these people with the money, they promised me a museum show. So when I photographed these people in the street, I'd stick them in there. I'd stick the photographs in the installation, right? So in the wintertime, these guys would like, they'd get ready to go into the museum, and the guards are going, "Hold on, buddy." And the guy's saying like, "You can't mess with me. I'm going to look at my photograph. It's right over here." So they'd go in the museum and they could hang out because it was like somebody's house, right? So they'd get in there and they'd be like reading books all day long, and they'd be like, playing the radio and listen to the record player and all this stuff. So yeah, that's my house. That's my little house. So that's why I called it a home and homeless. Go ahead. So that was that. There's all in books. Oh, so this piece, I'll try to go quickly. Are you bored? Do we need to like take a break? Okay, so, this piece. So this was Spoleto. This was down in South Carolina, Spoleto Festival in South Carolina. I'm not gonna tell you the whole story, but so basically in a nutshell, I went to Ghana. There's a budget. So they sent me to Ghana. So I went to Ghana. I went to somewhere around Accra, and I photographed all those people in West Africa because it seemed logical, the whole slave trade thing. So, and if you're not familiar, many people would hold that many people from West Africa got put into these boats and brought across the Atlantic Ocean and, forced to work in slave-like conditions in parts of the Americas. So I figured, well, maybe I'll just like photograph their descendants. Like I can't photograph them, so I'll photograph their descendants. I'll photograph the descendants of the people that built the infrastructure in the United States. So I did that. And then I projected their images onto the wall of an old plantation that was in Charleston, South Carolina. So it was like, these slides, whenever you show them, they kind of dissolve like that, and it looks like they're sort of coming out of the wall, and they're kind of looking at you, and then they kind of go back, they kind of dissolve. So then I put that big old thing, because it was like a museum in this place. So I did this antebellum, this old Victorian drape, and I put that, it's all red velvet, and then I put this drape in the house like that, and then I don't know if you can see it, I don't have my little pointer, but you can see those little dots on that curtain. That's a Big Dipper. So, they look at the Big Dipper, you go north and you get away. It's not that easy, but that's the basic premise. And these little cords down here were wrapped up around so that, we're freeing the curtain gets loose, and all that excess gets like red blood just pools down into the floor. It's all about excess, in this big opulent, and they just got, boy, he said, they called me up, they said, "You better get this thing out of here." So I had to go take it down. Go ahead. I had to do a de-installation. The women that worked in the place refused to go to work. That thing, it made them uncomfortable. So it worked. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful to those ladies in South Carolina, but it worked. So we got Jerusha, and we had this big thing. People got off the bus. There were like 3 busloads of people that came in there. I don't think 3 busloads of people came in that place all year. 3 busloads of people came, everybody got out, and we had this big, this big celebration. People came, and Jerusha just cut them down. She just went in there and she said, "I like this fabric," and she got a pair of scissors and cut those great big red drapes down. So we took that fabric and we went down the street and we built the Garden of Enlightenment, and we worked with the quilters that were across the street of the Wilmot Fraser Elementary School, and we gifted the fabric to these quilters, and they worked with the young people that went to the school, and they built they built these quilts. The quilts of dreams, right? So the children, they put all of their ideas and they wove those into the quilts. I don't have that. But what we do have is a Garden of Enlightenment. It turns out that these kids at the Wilmot Fraser Elementary School were failing all their tests. They were going to close the school. So, we built this garden, and it turned out, to make a long story short, that the kids were just hungry. They didn't have any food. They didn't have a lunch program. So once we built the garden, they had fresh food. The school stayed open for another 5 years because we just fed them. What the heck are they doing with all that money? So in this other piece, there's a triptych. There was enlightenment, acknowledgement, and memorialization. So I went out to this other plantation, and I was looking for because I wanted to go visit the ancestors. And I couldn't find them. This was a big place. And I know how many people it took to do the African American Garden Project. It's a lot of people. And this is a plantation. This place was huge. And I'm looking around and I said, where's all the ancestors? And they said, who? And I said, where are the slaves buried? And they said, oh, through those bushes. So do y'all know what a chigger is? Man, I had these nasty little bugs and they get on you and they bury, anyway. So I go through all these bushes and I get out in there and I'm looking, I don't see a thing. I saw one lonely, here it is. They got one lonely tombstone for some guy, which is lovely. But then as I was walking over to that tombstone, I noticed that there was all these depressions in the ground. And I thought, oh my goodness, here they are. This is everybody. These are all the, oh goodness, there's another one. I mean, there were just scores of individuals that had been buried without any acknowledgement whatsoever. So I worked with my friend, Thad Mosley. I called up Thad and I said, hey, Thad, you want some money? And he said, yeah. And I said, you want to do a sculpture? He said, well, Lonnie, yeah, is there any opportunity to work with you? So Thad's 90 something, right? Now he's this little old man. The cat is built like a fire plug. He's like this wide, he's that high. You should look him up on the internet. Thaddeus Mosley, I wrote a book about him. It's just amazing. He does these incredible wooden sculptures. So we did that, and he drove him down, Thad. So he drives him down from Pittsburgh to this, and we get out there and mix these things up and stick them out there. Go ahead. So that was that. That was the room they wanted me to work in. They wanted me to work in the slave quarters. Like I go down to Charleston and they're saying like, yeah, you can do a project at Spoleto. Here's the slave quarters. I had other ideas. Go aheay. What's that? Oh, okay, these are quick. I'll speed it up. Yeah, they sharecroppers. So a friend of mine, go ahead. So a friend of mine, John. So a friend of mine, we built this big basket. It's like a cornucopia, right? And we put all kinds of junk in it. So you could go, there was stuff from all over the world. And you could go in there and buy stuff. There's quilts and photographs and top of cloth. And we put that in Cincinnati. Oh, so the money goes to the sharecroppers so that they can have some food and money. Go ahead, so we did that one. And then, so I departed from the mind and the body and the spirit and the house and education and all that stuff. So now I'm just I got momentum, so I'm trying to go. And I was telling somebody a little bit earlier about this project that we did in North Philadelphia because these people's church had burned down and they didn't have a place to go to do what people do in churches. And so I wanted to give them a place where they could be where they could rest and think and be quiet or get married or christen their baby. So I built this kind of a gazebo kind of thing. So that was that. Oh, inside I put the kind of a learning center. I'll show you later. Oh, this was one of those things where, crossing boundaries in Youngstown, Ohio, this was one of those kind of crazy things where this group doesn't want to talk to this group, It's like, would you get over it? They just built this amazing building for you guys to go into and use, and you don't want to go in there because you think he's going to be in there. And you don't. I said, fine. How about if I just take your picture and put it in there? And they said, yeah, okay, go ahead. So I make his photograph, and I put their pictures up in there, and I made them really big. But they're from both the opposite side of the tracks, but I stuck them right together. And I put those other, that's because it was like a sporting thing. So in order to see the pictures, they had to go in the building. Thank you. It's still there. They're happy. They get along. Go ahead. Oh, yeah, okay. This is one of those things where, let's see what happens when you push the button. Oh, yeah, so these guys, they migrated from the southern United States to the northern United States up through the Mason-Dixon line across into Philadelphia. And these people photographed here. And do you see what's going on? Like the photograph is not the end. The photograph is the beginning. The photograph opens the conversation, right? So here, the photograph just activates the installation. And all those people, when they came, they were carpenters and cooks, they were writers and seamstresses, they were songwriters, they were craftsmen, they were artisans. Push the button to see what happens. So, yeah, there's a whole series of these things. So I just photographed their descendants because they all, they got jumped on flat cars in 1920, and her mother would have jumped on a flat car in 1920 and come north. A flat car that was supplied by the railroad to bring workers into the factories. A flat car. Go ahead. I would have got on it. I would have rode up north. See what happens next. See that quilt? This is crazy. Like my Aunt Minnie made that quilt, right? And I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but these are from the old country. Hold on a minute. Would you go back the other way? Stop fooling around. So there's like, those are the things that they would have hauled with them on those flat cars. So I just made this big installation in the African American Museum in Philadelphia. And then, so the pictures were the people that were currently alive. The pictures that are on the veils are people, those are the ancestors. And then these ones are another remembrance of the illustrative past that African Americans enjoyed. Look at this piece, look at that quilt. Does that look familiar? Slightly, yes? That one's from Mali. And Minnie made the one, Molly made the other one. What the heck? I was in a hut and somebody runs in with this thing and he gives it to me. And I'm going like, I'm not buying anything. He says, this is a gift. This is a gift from your people. And I'm going like, what are you talking about? And he says, take it, just take it. So I take it and I open it up and I said, this is Aunt Minnie's quilt. And he says, these are your people. And I'm going like, I found my people. I'm home. But it's nuts, right? Okay, go ahead, push the button again. So that's the closest I ever got to roots. I don't know anything about Ancestry.com or anything. So this lady, that's her mother, and they look like twins. Go ahead. It's nuts, this whole thing about ancestry. Oh, so this is the thing where, the old people are afraid of the young people, and the young people keep trying to beat up on the old people. So I said, well, y'all just gotta listen to each other. So I said, you want a camera? And they said, yeah. And I said, you can have the camera, but you gotta listen to old people. And they said, okay. So I gave them the camera and I taught them how to use it. And now they gotta sit and listen. They did all these oral histories and now they have an archive for their neighborhood. Now we got old people and young people talking to each other. It's just like craziness. Go ahead. Oh, okay, now we're almost done. So, well, no, we're not. We're about halfway through. But anyway, so this thing, a friend of mine, this cat is he lives in San Francisco. He's an amazing architect, right? Go ahead. So he says, you're gonna curate an exhibition in Nevada. And I said, okay, so I'm making a building and you're the curator. I just said, okay, great. So he builds this thing out in the middle of nowhere, right? The Museum of No Spectators. And I got artists from all over the world and I stuck them in there. And there it is. Oh, there's a lady from Okazani, from South Africa. Oh, there they are. It's no spectators because everybody has to make something. And then they make the stuff and they stick them up. Oh, my friend, Carrie Weems, I think she might be local. That's me. So there's Carrie, and yeah, she took my picture. So we had been collaborating for many years. I drew that. I took that picture. That's our stuff. So then she says, Lonnie, I want you to do, and I was like, okay, what do you want to do? So she says she's working on this thing. So we go and we make this big old hologram. There's Carrie, there was Lincoln. That's her. You have to push this one really fast. So that's me. Oh, so that's the one there's another one, right? In 2022, the Smithsonian Institution acquired this piece and stuck it in their National Portrait Gallery. So that's that. So then, now, this is the moment that you've all been waiting for. Go ahead, just keep pushing the button. Oh, so, because what happened, I had been doing a conversation with the world for like 20-something years, right? And then this lady in San Francisco from the San Francisco Art Commission my mind. So she calls up and she says, do you want to stick these things in Philadelphia? And I'm in San Francisco. Go ahead, just keep pushing the button. Then I said, yeah, sure. So I go down and I start taking pictures of San Franciscans. And there, she takes them, and like Tom mentioned a little bit earlier, there's these great big giant, huge, like in Paris, those great big round hickeys, those kiosky thingies that go downtown. So I made all these photographs. They made these great big 12 by 4 foot sculptures, or posters, and they stuck them in those things in downtown. So now some lady from Canada, she sees these things, and she goes into the city hall, and she finds Meg Schiffler, and she says to her, you know, can I call this artist, because he needs to come to Canada and do one of these. And Meg calls me up and she says, this lady, I think she's crazy, but should I give her your number? And I said, yeah. I said, go ahead. You know, what's it gonna hurt? I said, we're all a little crazy. Keep going, keep going. So this lady calls me up. Oh, well, it wasn't from Morocco. That's a different one. Just go through those real quick. So, but Morocco is a whole different thing. I mean, it's a lovely project, but again, the photograph is not the end product. The photograph activates like a larger project, because we went back and forth between these quilters in Brooklyn and these women over in Morocco, and they all got together and they made a big old quilt and everybody was happy. We all hugged and shook hands. And we ate a lot of baklava. Then, yeah, there they are. It was lovely. It took a couple of years. But this lady from Calgary, she says, you got to come to Calgary and do this thing. And I said, okay, fine. So I get up there and I start working with these Native Americans that live in Calgary, and I start photographing them. So while I'm there, you can go through all of these really quickly too. So yeah, okay, good. So there was a woman there from Finland who saw that work, and apparently she was moved. And she says, you need to come to Finland to do this work. And I said, okay, fine. So I get on an airplane and I go over to this little town called Oulu. And Oulu is like up near the Arctic Circle someplace. It's near Rovaniemi. And I start working with these Finnish people, the Somalians and the Ghanaians and all of those people that had migrated there. These stories that they can tell of having to cross the desert and work their way up to one of the only countries that would take them at that time, which was Finland, right? Where it's freezing cold. So they managed to get from the equator to the Arctic Circle to find a place to live. Hold on just a second, because this guy, I said, man, I said, it's freezing out here. I says, what, you lived in Somalia. He says, no, I like it. I like it, yeah, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful country. I said, the food is different, the people are different. He says, it's nothing. Here, when I go to sleep, I know that I will wake up in the morning. In Mogadishu, when I'd go to sleep, I could never know if I would wake. And even there, it was dangerous. There was a problem. Some people didn't like all these people that were moving into their community, so they'd lure them up to the top of the roof and they'd feed them a lot of beer and they'd push them off. However, after I started to photograph them, and we had another one of those exhibition things where I got a place and I put in, that's the opening. They brought out a marching band. No, that song's gonna be stuck in my head all night. But there's the photographs, and there's the people, and they're all there together. You can just push the button again, because it just goes on. There's the fish, the whole thing. But that was, yeah. So I'm using the photographs. I'm putting, and I'm just, if you want to see your picture, you have to come in the building, because I learned that from like Ohio, right? So I stuck them all in there, and they came. They were respectful. They didn't yell at each other. The murder rate went down. They quit killing each other. In Christchurch, they had that really bad earthquake, and they wanted to, somebody saw the thing in Finland, and they wanted me to do it in Christchurch. So I went down and worked with these people. The website still works. It's like, they talk about, it was a catharsis for them to be able to make work and to talk about their heritage. We can go through these. I gave them the opportunity to be able to, they would tell me what they wanted in the photograph and I would help them realize it. They took me to skin raisings. They took me into these kinds of intimate ceremonies. I think earlier we talked with another class about building trust with communities. So I just kept going. And they kept taking me deeper and deeper into their community. The Maori were really wonderful people. Go ahead, push the button. So I stuck that downtown where people could see it. And then whenever I started to work in Turkana on what I thought was going to be a water project, because the Italians had dammed up the river up in Ethiopia, and the Lake Turkana, which is the home to our common ancestor, Lucy. That's what they did to the river. So I'd go in and I'd have these community meetings, and I thought that I was going to try to do something about the water, and there's nothing to do. I can't fight against governments. It's too big. There's nothing I can do with a picture. So even just going fishing, I had to get a security force to go out onto the lake. It was challenging. And then I realized that I was involved not in an effort to save a way of life, but I was involved in writing a eulogy for people that had existed for tens of thousands of years as pastoralists, and now suddenly were disappearing into obscurity. And they share these moments with me. Oh, there he is. The chiefs wanted to meet in a dry riverbed. We'll just double tap it twice because it's really long and I don't want it. It just takes too long to play. It's all these women that go down and they start singing songs. They're way down there. Say what? Tell me when to move forward. I just think this is beautiful footage. Because I had just been photographing and they just went down there. The women separated themselves and they went down the river and they started to sing about killing the politicians. They were singing like, "Oh, you dirty politicians, we know what you're doing, and if you lie to us again, we'll kill you in your sleep." Oh, that's not funny. But it is, but there they are. But it takes so long to play the whole thing. It was just spontaneous. Oh, come on, walk faster. But I got all this stuff. I'm like, wait for me. Okay. These are gifts. these people just include me. Is that all? Is that it? Oh, questions, questions. I know you want to go. I know you got something to do. But does anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Yes. Who is that? You.
You do a lot of speaking about ancestral-based relationships.
Yes.
And this is the first time I've actually heard you put a date to this. I heard it, and I looked around the room to see if anyone else reacted the same way. When was your grandmother born?
1860.
She heard it. Yeah.
Where was she born?
Grandma was born near something called Coal Station or Iron Station. It's near Lincolnton or Hickory, which is the next largest town in North Carolina.
So your grandmother was a slave?
Yes.
Okay.
And lived to be 100?
Yes. At least. I did. I found I did all that hunting and the ancestry thingy. And I did, honest to goodness, find her birth certificate, and it said 1860.
Does that impact any of your work, having had that relationship with her and that knowledge of that proximity to slavery?
I would ask, but they wouldn't talk.
Okay.
I always asked as a young fellow, because it was deep, it was traumatic, because they would talk about this stuff in elementary school. And in the 60s, it's very different, learning about like those kinds of things, because it's almost like a stigma. It wasn't, something like, you get a special holiday or anything like that. It was just like, oh, yeah, you're descended from a slave. And it's like, no, I'm not. But so I would run home and I say, is this real? Nothing. Finally, Uncle Floyd just said, you should just stop talking about that. Nobody wants to talk about that. So that's when I realized that it was just too painful. They would talk about almost everything else, but that. It was hard to get information. So any information that I dig out, I have to get it myself, because now they're all past.
I'm curious about what's coming up next in terms of where you're taking the work, and it's fascinating seeing the work sort of emerge out of photography and out of that more sort of traditional photographic background, and then move into this entirely more engaged sort of social dimension of working directly with people. And where is it going next?
You mean the conversation with the world?
Well, or any other projects too. I'm just curious.
Okay, so I'll try to do a quick rundown. And I don't like to talk about things before I do them.
Yeah.
I like to do stuff and then say, I did it. But I'm supposed to go talk to people that are doing a documentary about Thaddeus Mosley, which is why I mentioned that. A bunch of people from Scandinavia are very interested in Thad. He's almost 100 and he's still working in his studio in Pittsburgh. So there's that. I probably have to go back to South Sudan this summer to work with the Turkana, because I need to finish the eulogy. And yeah, that's it, that's enough. The conversation with the world, there's some people that are interested in me doing it in North America, because I've done it in the rest of the world, and now they're saying, well, if you ran out of Polaroid film, why don't you do a digital version? You could do that here in the modern world. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to try it.
I was curious about that too, in terms of sticking with the Polaroid and the 4x5, and especially after seeing the women dancing and the colorful clothes and the neck beads, and obviously being able to peel the photograph off and just hand it to him was a very big deal. Yeah. So, but I assume it's not just a technical question. It's more like how is that, you stuck with that for a reason, obviously, that's been important.
Sharing. It's sharing. So I'm able to, usually, before that, I'd have a regular conventional camera, I'd go in and I'd take a picture and that'd be the end of it. And then if I was able to go back, if I was able to get some paper, if I was able to get in the darkroom and print, if I had the postage, if I could send it back, then they'd have a picture, maybe, if it didn't get lost in the mail. When I had the Polaroid, I see you, we share that moment. It's a kind of a communion because we have this interaction with that, even though that gigantic machine is there. But then there's this moment in the collaboration where they're fully aware that I'm there and I'm looking at them. And then there's this sort of wonderful, usually, it doesn't always happen, but there's this wonderful moment where they they reveal themselves and then they just stand for their portrait. And it's like, okay. And then I make the image and then I can give them the image and sometimes they like it, sometimes they don't. And then, but there's this reciprocity, there's this collaboration. And sometimes it really works. And it's good for everybody. And then those things wind up. There was one fishing village I was in Ghana, I was driving down the road going to Cape Coast. And my friend, who was driving the car. When you rent a car in Ghana, you get the driver and the car and lunch, and it's $40 a day. It was like, so my friend is driving the car, and I'm going, what's that? And he's going, it's a village. And I'm saying, looks improvised. And I said, can we go see? And he says, yeah. We drive over. He says, would you like to photograph? And I said, yeah. Within 15 minutes, they had organized a table and a line of individuals. And I'm going, what did you say to those people? And I said, I just told them we are just going to make some photograph. And I said, okay. So I'm there for like a half a day. I'm just like box after box. It turns out that would be, because it's a fishing village. They live up the Volta someplace, and they come down to the coast and do fishing, sell it, and then go back home. So they're just like migratory fisher people. And that would be the picture that they would use to put in the newspaper whenever they pass away. So you never know what people are going to do with these things. I'm happy to be able to do something. What?
I don't get to see you enough, so I just asked you.
That's fine.
Your art is incredibly conversational and a document about people and place.
Yes.
I'm going to put you on the spot and embarrass you. I apologize in advance. Have you ever considered a documentary, a film or video-based documentary?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think about it all the time.
Okay. What do you need to do it?
Somebody that would be interested in producing a documentary.
Okay. Done.
I mean, I'm trying, but I get the light bill paid.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how or when did you decide to move your practice from photography to include sculpture, installation, and sort of like artivism? How did that happen for you?
It was a matter of being able to tell a story that needed to be told. And I couldn't be bound by a medium. It was that thing with Andorra. I needed for people to be able to go in. I was in Japan taking pictures of those sticks whenever she died. And I just was consumed by that loss. And I wanted people to know what it was like to know her. So, they couldn't do it with a picture. So I wanted, because I'd been in these museums like all over the place, and you could see, Napoleon's shoes and, Louis the 14th, underwear. So I said, well, I want people to be able to see Aunt Dora's stuff. So I just stuck it in the museum. Like, my folks are pretty important to me. So I wanted to be able to articulate that experience for people. I thought that if I could build that environment, that people could realize how important their own lives and the lives of the people around them were. I wanted to venerate that. And I wanted people to be able to understand everything that your ancestors have given you to be here now. I was talking to a fellow earlier, and he was talking about he didn't know what kind of legacy he could leave for his children, whether he should push them into doing one thing or another. You don't have to do anything. You just be there. You just have to love them. That's your legacy. That's what they gave you. They gave you the life that you have now. How can I articulate that? Yes.
How do you navigate the relationship with the so-called art world in terms of exhibition spaces, commercial, non-commercial, the museums? Do you present your work?
If you haven't noticed, nobody's much as interested. I mean, Tom is interested. But as far as a commercial gallery goes, it's the criticism that I got when I was a youngster. Well, there were all those parties. You'd have to go and show up and, be fancy. I was a painter, and it didn't resonate for me. So I wanted to do something else. But commercially, as far as this work goes, I didn't have a commodity. I wasn't producing anything that anybody could sell. And then whenever I did, get the money from Heinz or somebody, then I'd turn around and I'd go help people. I'd go put food on people's tables or something. And that's not anything that's commercially viable. So they didn't want to have anything to do with me. Meanwhile, I've got these prints. Thank you.
Thank you.